Welcome to the 7 core management behaviors, when and how to use them. This is Module 2, Delegate. This series is brought to you by John Dario and the Retail Management Formula, LLC. Before we get into the substance of Module 2, let's do a quick recap of the key lessons from Module 1. First, we established that management is the art of supervising people. Second, we learned that effective management is dependent on using the most appropriate management behavior for the specific situation at hand. And third, we learned that the situation is defined by 2 variables, the employee's capability and the timing of the management behavior. We used a 2x2 table called the Management Situation Grid to help us understand which management behaviors go with which situations. We put low and high capability on the vertical axis and timing of the management action on the horizontal axis, and we filled the 7 core management behaviors into the appropriate quadrants. This module is focused on the management behavior Delegate, which is in the top left quadrant of the Management Situation Grid. The object of Delegate is to assign an employee to complete a particular task. In other words, you have a task that must be completed and you want to delegate responsibility for the task to one of your employees. But why is delegating such an important management behavior? Well, there's at least 3 good reasons. First, delegating is how you get stuff done. Remember in the first module when we talked about the fact that your job as a manager is to get everything that needs to be done? Well, you can't possibly do everything yourself. So the only alternative is to have your employees do some of the work. You do that by delegating. Second, by delegating tasks to your employees, you free up your time to get your management responsibilities done. There are some things that only you can do. If you're stuck doing work that your employees could and should be doing, it means you aren't doing the work that only you as the manager can do. And that means it might never get done if you don't delegate. And third, it helps your employees to feel good about their roles and their contributions to the team. Remember one of our foundational concepts, that everybody wants to be successful. When employees complete tasks successfully, they gain a sense of pride in their work. Now let's check the mission against the variables in the Management Situation Grid just to be sure we fully understand the situation. The top left quadrant is when employee capability is high and timing of the management action is before employee performance. That makes sense, right? You only want to assign responsibility for a task to an employee who is actually capable of doing the task, right? And of course, the action is before employee performance because the point of delegating the task is to actually ask the employee to perform the task. So that checks out as well. Now let's think back to the discussion we had in Module 1 about mismatches between management behavior and situation. What would happen if we delegated a task to an employee whose capability was not up to the challenge? Well, for one thing, the job probably won't get done correctly. And for another, the employee will feel unsure and hesitant about the assignment. So our management will be ineffective in 2 different ways. Knowing whether an employee's capability is high or low is not always straightforward. Let's talk about how we can best assess capability. There are 3 ways you can assess whether employee capability is high enough. First, you can be reasonably sure if you have personally seen the employee perform the task at some point in the past. For example, if you have observed the employee successfully help a customer in the past, then you can feel confident that their capability for helping customers is high enough for you to delegate to them the task of helping a customer right now. A second way you can feel reasonably confident is if you know through some other trusted source that the employee has performed the task successfully in the past. If another manager, for instance, has observed the employee helping a customer and has passed along the assessment that their customer service capability is high, then you can also confidently delegate the task of helping a customer right now. And a third way is for you to ask the employee if they have successfully performed the task in the past. The employee's self-assessment may not be as accurate as your own, of course, because you may have different standards of success. But we already accepted the belief that most employees want to do a good job, so we can have faith that most will be honest when directly asked this question. In all 3 cases, there's one important constant. The constant is the employee has successfully completed the task in the past. It's an important distinction. If they have never done the task or they have done it and failed, you can't assume their capability is high. If you cannot assume their capability is high, then the situation is not the top left quadrant of the management situation grid. And that means that delegate is not the appropriate management behavior. More on that in Module 3 when we talk about train, but understand that this is not a small point. Much time is wasted and much frustration created when tasks are mistakenly delegated to employees who do not actually have the capability to perform them. So take this very seriously. One more caution. Be careful of nuanced differences between seemingly identical tasks. Let's go back to the example we've been using, delegating an employee to help a customer. I cheated in those previous examples. I said that if we've seen the employee successfully help a customer in the past, we can assume their capability is high and we can confidently delegate the task to them. But that's not fully true. Just because the employee successfully helped a customer who is shopping in the clothing department doesn't mean they can successfully help a customer in the technology department. Or just because I saw them successfully help a customer during the slow part of the day doesn't mean that they can successfully do so during a peak customer rush time when the dynamics are very different. There can be a lot of hidden differences between tasks, and you should take care to understand them before assuming that an employee's capability is high. When it comes to delegating, your focus should be on what and when. In other words, your mission is to explain to the employee exactly what you want them to do and when you want them to do it. I'm now going to move on and share some important tips that will help you to delegate most effectively. We'll cover 6 tips in the remainder of this module. Tip number 1 is to use common courtesy and respect. For example, use common courtesy terms like please and thank you. Yes, most employees will do what you tell them to do, but they will feel tons better if you communicate in a more even, level way than in a boss-subordinate manner. But one caution here, don't make the mistake of asking an employee to do you a favor by completing a task. It's not a favor, it's an assignment. While you want to be respectful, you do not want to undermine your own authority while delegating. Another aspect of common courtesy is to make good eye contact while you're delegating. This is true with any type of personal communication. When delegating, it ensures you have the employee's attention, and it shows you are open to hearing their questions as well. This implies that delegating is best handled via face-to-face communication rather than through email or another passive communication method, and that is true whenever it is possible. Tip number 2 is to give clear and specific direction. It sounds simple, but I'm going to tell you a story from my early days as a manager that will show it's not always as simple as it seems. I was the manager of a sporting goods store, and we were getting ready for a big weekend sale. We had this bare end cap in our golf department, and we needed to put the 3 advertised golf balls on the end cap. I delegated the task to the supervisor of the golf department. I asked him to put the Titleist golf balls on the first shelf, the Top Flight balls on the second shelf, and the Wilson staff balls on the third shelf. I asked him if he understood. He said he did. I was positive I had been clear and specific enough. When I went back a couple of hours later to see how it turned out, what do you think I saw? I was shocked to see that the Titleist balls had been put on the bottom shelf instead of the first shelf. I couldn't understand how this mistake could possibly have been made, so I asked the supervisor. His answer was clear. He said that I told him to put the Titleist balls on the first shelf, and his interpretation was the first shelf was the bottom shelf. Oh boy. I had to take responsibility for the misunderstanding. So what could I have done to have avoided the problem? Well, I could have demonstrated it or drawn it on paper. That would have made my intention more clear. I could also have given more explanation about the why behind my specific instruction. I could have explained that I wanted Titleist on the top shelf because that ball was the highest revenue producer of the 3 on sale. It was the higher status item, and it was the best deal for the customers. If I explained all that, the supervisor would have understood that by first I meant top. In addition, he may have been better equipped to make similar decision on his own in the future. In any event, the lesson for me was that no matter how specific I thought I was, it wasn't specific enough to get the result I wanted. Tip number 3 is to give the specific time frame the employee has to do the job. In the absence of direction on the time frame, the employee operates without a deadline, and the task may take longer to complete than you expect. It could also go the other way. In other words, you may expect an operational task to be done during slow times of the day, but the employee may start working on it immediately, even though customer service is the priority of the moment. You always want to be sure that you and the employee are on the same page in terms of timing for the task you're delegating. Tip number 4 is to explain to the employee the amount of freedom they have to make their own decisions about the task. This is important for a couple of reasons. First, you want to retain control over the aspects of the task that are not negotiable. Second, you truly want to give the employee some control over their own work so they will be bought into the task to the greatest degree possible. Let's look at a specific example. Imagine you're the manager of a clothing store or a clothing department within a store. You have this empty fixture that must be filled. You know you want the table filled with this t-shirt that comes in 8 different colors. That's the part that's non-negotiable. But it doesn't matter to you how the colors are laid out on the table. One option is for the best-selling colors to be on the most easily accessible tiers of the table, or the brightest colors could go in the most visible locations, or some other logic could be used. You're okay with leaving that decision up to the employee performing the task, so you should directly communicate that freedom. You may add the stipulation that they must use some proactive logic rather than just randomly assorting the colors on the table. Tip number 5 is to confirm understanding and be open for questions. The best way to confirm understanding is to ask the employee to repeat back to you in their own words what they understand the task to be. That gives you the chance to ensure you're both on the same page. Imagine if I had done that in the golf ball example we talked about a few minutes ago. Make sure to ask the employee if they have any questions about the task, then patiently answer the questions. It's also important to watch for signals that indicate the employee does not buy into the direction he or she's been given. Perhaps they don't think the time frame is realistic, or they may not believe the project is worth doing at all. If the employee does not buy into the task that's being delegated, they are not likely to give it their full effort. So be sure that body language, tone, and employee comments all indicate commitment to the completion of the task. Tip number 6 is to go back and check in partway through the employee's completion of the task. Going back to my golf ball example, what would have happened if I had stopped back to check in after a few minutes instead of waiting until the task was finished? I would have seen the supervisor starting to put the Wilson staff balls on the top shelf, and I would have gotten to the bottom of the misunderstanding before he spent all the time he did to complete the project. By waiting until he was done and then telling him he got it wrong, I'm sure he was thinking, why didn't you tell me sooner? Now I have to do the whole darn thing again. So to summarize, we discussed 6 tips that will maximize your effectiveness with the core management behavior of delegate. 1. Use common courtesy and respect. 2. Give clear and specific direction. 3. State the specific timeline for the task. 4. State the amount of freedom the employee has to make their own decisions about the task. 5. Confirm understanding and be open for questions. And 6. Check in partway through the task completion. By using these delegation techniques, you'll be most likely to meet the objective of delegation in a successful way, and that is to assign a capable employee to successfully complete a specific task. That brings us to the end of Module 2, Delegate. Next up will be Module 3, Train. Thank you, and we'll talk again next time.